Thank you, Olivia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and let me start by adding my own welcome and thanking you for joining us here today. In particular, I'd like to thank Taoiseach Enda Kenny, President of the European Commission, Barroso, and also President Van Rompuy, who spoke to us earlier by video, all for joining us this morning, taking time out of their busy schedule, but for what is really an important issue, the business of Europe. I'd also like to acknowledge the generous support of our principal sponsor, PwC, our communications partner, Eircom, and our media partner, CNBC. And also I'd like to acknowledge the support of our colleagues in Business Europe and the European Roundtable of Industrialists. Today I want to talk to you about the future of Europe, the future of Ireland. Ireland's recent economic history has taught us that business can and must play a central role in securing this future. Our businesses can drive growth and deliver the recovery we all yearn for. Despite the fact that Ireland was among the first to be hit by the full force of the global economic crisis, Irish businesses have adapted quickly to this new economic reality. As a result, Ireland has now returned to comparatively solid, if low, growth. It's certainly been a difficult journey. The road ahead is obviously not straightforward. High unemployment, weak demand remain a drag on our economy. But these are problems that are shared across Europe. Steps can and must be taken at a national level to meet these challenges. But clearly we're in this together. A decisive EU-led response is required. The last few years have understandably seen an overwhelming focus on the stabilization of the public finances, on the banking sector, and of course on the single currency itself. These reforms have been necessary and will help prevent future crises, but clearly they're not enough. The European economy still remains in the doldrums. So the question is, what can we do? The focus now must very firmly move from stabilization to job creation and growth in the real economy. We need to ensure that Europe has a dynamic growth model, a model that's fit for purpose and one that is destined to succeed. While some countries are doing well, Europe's share of world output is projected to fall by almost a third over the next 2 decades. Some of this is inevitable, given the massive growth potential that exists in emerging economies. But as business leaders, we need to ensure that Europe is fully aware of these challenges and is actually responding accordingly. So the questions we need to ask are, how can Europe compete in the global market? How can we create high-quality jobs for the future? And how can we put in place a more effective and competitive regulatory framework within the European Union? We need to be able to provide answers to these questions because the current trajectory is not sustainable. Europe today accounts for a little over 7% of the world's population. It produces 25% of global output, but it has to finance 50% of global social spending. Chancellor Merkel noted that Europe will have to work very hard just to maintain its prosperity and its way of life. Germany, like Ireland, has shown that European countries can regain lost competitiveness. Radical labour market reforms a decade ago meant that Germany is now well positioned to weather the economic crisis. In the midst of a global slump, German exporters are flying high. But too often, our competitors in other parts of the world are stealing a march on us Europeans. The US, for example, is on track to halve its dependence on imported oil, and its industry is benefiting from gas prices which are just 1/3 of those in most EU countries. For a small, open economy like Ireland, we can look to places like Singapore, which has relentlessly adapted and reformed to ensure that it is among the best countries in the world in which to do business. It consistently tops competitiveness surveys and business rankings. We need to move the debate on in Europe and to play from our considerable strengths. Europe remains a world leader in so many areas and has the potential to corner new markets, create new opportunities, and to be a global centre for enterprise and innovation. But we sometimes shoot ourselves in the foot. The recent agreement on European financial transactions tax, for example, will immediately put European firms at a competitive disadvantage globally. It is short-sighted and it sends out the wrong signal. Instead, the EU must work to make itself more attractive to business. It must drive down energy costs, learn from labour market reforms that have worked, and ensure that the tax system is competitive and attracts inward investment into Europe. Of course, initiatives at EU level to boost competitiveness and re-energise European business models must be matched here in Ireland. Ireland's underlying globalised, business-friendly economic model has proved itself to be resilient. Businesses have demonstrated an incredible ability to learn and adapt to changing circumstances. Managers have moved quickly to stabilise the financial position of their firms and to adjust their cost structures. Employees have also made a vital contribution, accepting new work practices and improving productivity. Last April, Ibec launched our campaign Driving Ireland's Recovery. This was part of our ongoing effort to put the views and priorities of business at the very top of the national agenda. The campaign sets out how to address key challenges facing our country and the central role that business can and must play. We've outlined how together we can increase domestic demand, support job creation, keep Ireland strong in Europe, and deliver world-class public services. Since the launch, there's been a progress on a number of fronts. The successful ratification of the Fiscal Stability Treaty safeguarded Ireland's interests in Europe. New provisions were introduced in the recent budget to support and increase domestic demand, and government proposals that would have added to the cost of doing business have been resisted. But much more needs to be done. More needs to be done to make Ireland more competitive, more successful, and ultimately more prosperous. The key to achieving this is the same at domestic level as it is at European level. To echo what President Barroso has just said, we need growth. The focus on stabilising the public finances must now shift to an unrelenting focus on growth. So what does this mean in practice? Three key issues will have a massive effect on our capacity to reach our growth potential: taxation, investment, and employment. On taxation, recent budgets here in Ireland have seen the tax burden increase dramatically to offset the massive hole left in the public finances by the collapse of the property market and the rapid contraction in domestic economic activity. This rise was necessary, but it should now end. There should be no new taxes over and above those already committed to in Budget 2013. The budgetary adjustment that remains to be done must be done by reducing expenditure. This is less damaging to growth and less damaging to job creation. In addition, the savings made as a result of the recent deal on the promissory notes should be partly used to ease somewhat the level of austerity over the next 2 years. This would be a welcome confidence boost to the citizens who have endured 4 years of austerity and would be a clear signal that the era of austerity is coming to an end. Yet to close the gap in the public finances, tax revenues will need to increase. But this increase in tax revenues must happen as a result of the buoyancy delivered by increased economic activity, not by further hikes in tax rates or the introduction of new tax revenue streams. The economy and Irish workers are already taxed enough. Suggestions to the contrary are simply not true. They're not supported by the facts. To Olivia's point, look at the detail. As a result of the universal social charge and other changes to the personal taxation regime, Ireland now has one of the highest marginal tax rates in the OECD. At 52%, the marginal tax rate at average earnings is well above the OECD average of 36%. It also kicks in at relatively low income levels, which means that employees with average earnings are taxed at the highest marginal tax rate. On investment, tax has a role to play here too. A tax code that rewards work needs to be supported by encouraging investment, at a household, company, and at government level. This will translate into increased economic activity, job creation, and ultimately more tax revenue. Already, companies are planning for growth. Last year, investment in plant and machinery increased by 8%. It is projected to increase by 10% this year. But to fully reap the benefits, we need to ensure that the tax system supports and rewards this investment. The current capital gains tax regime does not. This needs to be looked at again by the government in the next budget. We need a system that supports genuine, long-term investment into Irish businesses. The ambition must be reflected in the public sector, notwithstanding the constrained public finances. It is vital that the recent talks on a successor to the Croke Park deal delivers increased productivity and sustainable long-term productivity, but also sustainable savings to the pay and pension bill. But we will still need to invest for the future. Our transport infrastructure improved dramatically in the last decade, but we're still far short when compared to other parts of Europe. Likewise, our health and education systems need further investment to deal with a growing population. The private sector can play an important role in financing such investment through public-private partnerships, particularly now that Ireland's sovereign position has improved on the financial markets and greater stability has returned to the Eurozone. At the household level, the stabilisation of the property market and a return to more normal spending and saving patterns and increased access to credit should see confidence start to return and investment levels increase. Unemployment. This is by far the most pressing and perhaps most difficult challenge to our economy. Given the urgency of the problem and the pressure it places on the public finances, it is not enough to sit back and wait for a recovery in the domestic economy. Last week, the government announced its latest action plan for jobs. It includes many sensible and practical ideas that will improve the business environment, reduce regulatory burden, and make it easier for companies to expand and take on new staff. It's a welcome step forward, and it's a clear indication that the government is listening to business. But it's vital that these positive steps are not undermined by policies from other parts of government that would have the opposite effect. It is crucial that there is no increase in the cost of employment and that nothing is done to undermine the flexibility of the Irish labour market or the voluntarist industrial relations environment that we have here. Ireland and Europe has the potential to recover strongly, and we have the right policies and a coordinated approach. At an EU level, Ireland should be at the forefront of the drive to renew and reinvigorate the European economic model. Ireland, yes, provides a case study on austerity, but more importantly, it provides a case study on growth. And that growth is led by Irish business. So our Irish companies are driving the recovery at home. We need to hear much more about how European businesses can lead the EU back to prosperity. The narrative needs to change, and we can help shape it. Ireland's current role, hosting the EU presidency, provides a unique opportunity to put growth, competitiveness, jobs at the very heart of the European policy debate. I'm confident that the active support of the business community, along with the political leaders, will bring this opportunity about. Finally, the ambition of making Ireland the best small country in the world in which to do business must be supported by pro-growth and pro-enterprise policies. To sum up, we need a tax system that rewards work and supports investment. We need labour market policies that keeps us flexible and competitive. And we need a training and education systems that gives people the skills and opportunities to get them out of the social welfare system and back to work. If the conditions are right, it is you, the people in this room, your counterparts in small, medium and large businesses right across this country who will drive that growth. Growth will enable us together as a society to create jobs, overcome the debt burden and deliver prosperity, public services and a quality of life that this country can legitimately aspire to. As Chief Executive of Ibec, I want to give you my commitment that Ibec will be with you every step of that way, supporting you at company, sector, national and international level, making sure that your voice is heard, your concerns and priorities are addressed. Thank you for taking the time for coming here today. It's an important topic. The scale of the support is enormous, and I think that it's clear that Irish businesses are leading the recovery for Ireland and ultimately for Europe. Thank you.